Hello everyone, in this video I will be providing an explanation of an American film called Bubble Boy. So, bring your coffee or favorite drink. The film revolves around a boy named Jimmy Livingston who is born with absolutely no immunity. Even the slightest germ can be fatal to him, so he must live in isolation. He is unable to touch anything without it being decontaminated. As a result, he spends his entire life inside a bubble-like plastic sphere to ensure his survival. His mother, Mrs. Livingston, is extremely overprotective of him. Until the age of 4, he wasn't even allowed to come home. However, after turning 4, his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Livingston, bring him home in his bubble. His room is also enclosed in a large bubble, allowing him to walk inside it. His parents use a pair of protruding hands on the bubble to simulate physical contact with him. All of his toys are thoroughly decontaminated to remove even the tiniest trace of germs and kept inside the bubble. Jimmy has been living in that room ever since. Mrs. Livingston never wants him to leave the bubble, so she concludes all bedtime stories with the princess dying because she was set free. He is only allowed to watch one TV channel and read one magazine, as Mrs. Livingston insists, they are the only ones ever made. She even uses the protruded arms to cut his hair and hug him. Mrs. Livingston is an extreme nationalist who teaches Jimmy only what she deems reasonable and imposes her beliefs on him. Unfortunately, Jimmy doesn't know any better, so he complies. Everyone in the city is aware of the unique Bubble Boy, but this fame doesn't work in his favor. Instead, the neighborhood kids mock him by wrapping themselves in plastic wrap when he's outside his home, leading to Mrs. Livingston frequently chasing them away. Jimmy's diet consists solely of homemade food. A decontamination system is set up with a plastic tube where Mrs. Livingston places his food to kill any germs before Jimmy can retrieve it. At 16 years old, Jimmy explains that he has grown up like any other kid and is content when he receives an electric guitar instead of a car. One day, while at his window, he spots a new girl named Chloe, who is the same age, moving into the neighborhood. Jimmy develops feelings for her but is unable to act on them, as he knows nothing about love or girls. Sensing his infatuation, his mother tells him a cautionary tale about a boy who died after touching the next-door whore. Over the next few years, Jimmy frequently watches Chloe from his window, and she also notices him observing her. He realizes something is happening to him, although he doesn't quite understand it. One morning, he wakes up with an erection and becomes frightened. Unfamiliar with the concept, he accidentally hits himself with a bat, resulting in tears and a call for his mother's help. Mrs. Livingston enters his room and has him recite the Pledge of Allegiance until he calms down. Chloe has a group of popular friends who taunt Jimmy by calling him the Bubble Boy, but she appears defensive when they do. One day, she knocks on the Livingston's door, and Mr. Livingston allows her inside. Chloe is intrigued by the system of plastic tubes throughout the house and follows one that leads to Jimmy's room. Jimmy is surprised and nervous because his mother is the only woman he has interacted with. Chloe engages him in conversation, expressing her admiration for his guitar. Jimmy tries to teach her how to play using the protruded hands. In the middle of their interaction, he suddenly recites the Pledge of Allegiance. From that day forward, they spend time together every day despite Mrs. Livingston's disapproval. A montage showcases their moments together, including Mrs. Livingston giving Jimmy a guinea pig in a ball for his birthday and allowing kids into his room for Halloween. On Chloe's birthday, she visits Jimmy's room while intoxicated, attempting to enter his bubble but passing out before she can do so. The story then jumps to Chloe's prom night, where her boyfriend Mark, whom Jimmy dislikes, picks her up, leaving Jimmy heartbroken. One night, Jimmy witnesses Chloe and Mark kissing through his window. The following day, Chloe visits Jimmy's room and reveals that she is engaged to Mark. She informs him of their upcoming wedding at Niagara Falls and presents him with a gift, which he disregards. Instead, he returns the guinea pig and asks her to leave, causing Chloe to leave in tears. Later, Jimmy opens the gift and discovers a snow globe with the words "I love you" inside, surprising him. Motivated by this, he shouts Chloe's name and decides to go to Niagara Falls to stop the wedding. Jimmy puts his efforts into creating a portable bubble shield and sneaks out of his house without his parents' knowledge. Excited to experience running for the first time, he reaches the bus station but realizes he has forgotten to bring money. Distressed, he attempts to cross the road and is struck by a bus. Fortunately, his bubble protects him from harm, and the bus passengers offer him a ride. However, he soon discovers that they belong to a religious cult that mistakenly believes he is their savior. When they realize their error, they set out to find Jimmy and free him from the bubble. Meanwhile, Jimmy meets a biker named Slim, who becomes impressed by his story of lost love. Slim shares his own tale of longing for his ex-girlfriend, Wildfire, and offers Jimmy a ride to Niagara Falls. Back home, Mrs. Livingston realizes that Jimmy is missing and becomes frantic. She and her husband embark on a search for Jimmy since the police require 24 hours before taking action. In another location, Slim and Jimmy reach Vegas, where they have fun at a casino. However, Jimmy is aware that he has limited time before the wedding, so he leaves Slim at the club, steals a scooter, and continues his journey. During his travels, Jimmy comes across his parents' car, and in a rush to escape, he gets into an accident. Luckily, his bubble bounces him into a moving train, allowing him to evade his mother's pursuit but trapping him with a group of freak show performers. They inform him about their oppressive boss, Dr. Freak, and Jimmy inadvertently frees them by accidentally knocking down the doctor. Determined to reach Niagara Falls, Jimmy seeks assistance at a restaurant, where he encounters police bullying a man named Pushpop. When Jimmy reveals his lack of immunity, the police assume he carries a contagious disease, causing chaos in the restaurant. Pushpop offers Jimmy a ride and agrees to take him to Niagara Falls. Meanwhile, Mrs. Livingston reaches Dr. Freak, who reveals Jimmy's destination, leading her to call Chloe and express her anger towards her. The cult group also locates Jimmy and begins pursuing him. During the chaos, Slim and his biker friends come to Jimmy's rescue. During the encounter, Slim recognizes Mrs. Livingston as his former love, Wildfire. Unbeknownst to them, they are driving on a runway, and a plane takes off with Jimmy on board along with an elderly pilot. They head towards Niagara Falls, but the plane crashes, causing Jimmy to fall into the waterfall. Fortunately, his bubble prevents him from drowning, and he manages to escape the water, rushing to the wedding venue. Inside the chapel, Chloe and Mark are exchanging vows when Jimmy enters, professing his love for her. In a desperate attempt to win her over, Jimmy tears open his bubble to kiss her but loses consciousness afterward. Chloe tries to wake him up, and Mr. and Mrs. Livingston arrive at the scene. Mrs. Livingston mourns her son's apparent death, but Mr. Livingston encourages her to reveal the truth. Embarrassingly, she confesses that Jimmy does not have any condition, admitting that she fabricated the story to protect him from the world's evils. Shocked but forgiving, Jimmy embraces his mother, and he and Chloe are celebrated by everyone present. The story concludes with a few months later, showing Chloe and Jimmy getting married, with all the people Jimmy encountered on his journey in attendance. Mr. Livingston, Mrs. Livingston, and Slim are now a couple, and Jimmy and Chloe drive away together for their honeymoon.